Hi, I'm Alister Chapman, and in this video I'm going to show you how the Sony PXW FX9 can be used to shoot beautiful, high-resolution anamorphic images. Even though the FX9 doesn't currently have a dedicated anamorphic desqueeze option, I found that its full-frame 6K sensor and oversampled 4K recordings can be used to produce anamorphic footage that rivals the most commonly used open-gate 35mm camcorders. So what is anamorphic? In the 1950s there became a desire to screen films with wider aspect ratios than the then common 1.375:1 or 4:3 Academy aspect ratio. If using 35mm film, wider aspect ratios could be achieved by masking the top and bottom of the film frame to produce aspect ratios such as the now common 1.85:1 or 17:9 widescreen flat format. However, the use of such a relatively small part of the 35mm film frame meant that with the film stocks of the day, the quality of the projected images wasn't great. By using a special camera lens that squeezes the image horizontally, the entire height of a 35mm 4:3 film frame can be used to capture a high-quality widescreen image. Then, when projected, the same type of lens is used on the projector to horizontally expand or de-squeeze the image back to the correct height and width. The end result is an aspect ratio wider than that of the film frame used to record it. This process of optically squeezing the image introduces distortions into the pictures not seen with normal spherical lenses. The greater the squeeze ratio, the more pronounced these distortions become. The resolution of the image will be greater vertically than horizontally. The bokeh in out-of-focus areas will be oval instead of round, and flares from point light sources will be much wider than they are tall. These and other anamorphic optical characteristics help create a visually interesting image that's become synonymous with the modern film look and is often considered highly desirable. If you try to use a 2x anamorphic lens with the already wide 17:9 aspect ratio of a super 35mm video sensor, the final aspect ratio becomes an ultra-wide 3.5:1. For most productions you'd need to crop the sides and expand the center part of this image to get the normal 2.39:1 aspect ratio, and this will reduce the image quality. Because of this, lenses that squeeze the image by 1.35 times were developed for use with 17:9 video sensors to also achieve a final aspect ratio of 2.39:1. However, the anamorphic characteristics introduced by a 1.35 times squeeze are much less pronounced than those from a 2 times squeeze. So wherever possible, it's desirable to use squeeze ratios greater than 1.35. But to do this, you need a sensor that is taller than a typical 17:9 super 35mm sensor. When the FX9 is set to its 6K full frame mode, the sensor scan height is tall enough to correctly accommodate most 35mm 2x and 1.8x anamorphic lenses. A 4:3 open-gate 35mm frame is typically around 28.8 by 18.1mm, and in full-frame 6K scan, the FX9 scan area is 35.7 by 18.8mm. So as you can see, it's almost exactly the right height to work with almost any 2x anamorphic 35mm lens. However, the sensor is also wider than we really need, so this does mean that you will need to crop the edges of the image in post-production. Normally this would be considered unacceptable as it could result in too low a final image resolution. But we have to remember that the FX9 sensor is a 6K sensor, so a bit of cropping isn't the end of the world. Even though the camera only records 4K, the fact that we're starting with a 6K sensor means that our cropped anamorphic image will still have as much or possibly even greater resolution than some of the most commonly used 35mm 4:3 open-gate cameras used to shoot anamorphic. An important consideration is that Bayer sensors typically result in images with a final resolution around 70% of the horizontal pixel count. As a result, the 4K recordings from the FX9 in its full-frame 6K scan mode are normally close to 4K resolution. When you then crop 30% from the sides of these 4K resolution recordings to get the correct 2.39:1 aspect ratio, you'll have a final resolution of around 2.8K. Now this doesn't seem great until you consider that the resolution you would get from a 4K 35mm open gate Bayer sensor would be little different. 70% of 4K is 2.8K. The sensors in many of the most commonly used 35mm open gate cameras only have a maximum of 3.2K of horizontal pixels, and these cameras will typically only achieve a horizontal resolution of around 2.2K. So as you can see, even though we need to crop the anamorphic images from the FX9, we can still achieve perfectly acceptable image quality thanks to its full-frame 6K sensor. So how do we do it? You can use normal 35mm 2x anamorphic lenses designed for 35mm film, or full-frame 2x anamorphic lenses. Lenses designed for both 4x3 sensors or 6x5 sensors can be used. Additionally, you can use 1.3x anamorphic lenses or anamorphic adapters. The camera needs to be set to full-frame 6K scan for all 2x lenses, but with 1.3x lenses, you can also use the full-frame 5K crop and Super 35 4K scan modes. Then go to the menu and the viewfinder settings. Under the VF settings, you'll find the option to add either a 1.3x or 2x D-squeeze to the viewfinder. The D-squeeze works for both recording and playback. For 1.3x anamorphic lenses, which are designed to be used with 16:9 or 17:9 sensors, the 1.3x D-squeeze simply squashes the viewfinder image vertically to the correct aspect ratio. If you're using a 2x anamorphic lens, which would normally be used with either a 4x3 or 6x5 sensor, the viewfinder image will be squashed vertically by 2x to correct the aspect ratio, but in addition the entire image will be enlarged slightly to eliminate the unwanted vignette at the sides of the image that results from the use of a full-frame sensor scan. What you see in the viewfinder is representative of the way the footage being shot will look after it's been de-squeezed in post-production. When using the de-squeeze function, you can add both aspect and safety zone markers, as well as guide frame markers. And in addition, you can use the user box markers to create a custom-sized marker box for custom aspect ratios or custom safe area indications. But do note that the de-squeezed image is only seen on the viewfinder LCD screen. The use of the de-squeeze function has no effect on the SDI or HDMI outputs or the recorded image. If you wish to use an additional external monitor, you can use a Sony or third-party monitor that has a built-in de-squeeze function. However, most external monitors won't compensate for the width of the FX9's full-frame sensor, so you may see some vignetting at the sides of the image when using 2x anamorphic lenses designed for 35mm film. In post-production, you'll need to first de-squeeze the footage by squashing it vertically by a factor of 2 to correct the 2x anamorphic distortion. Next, you'll need to zoom in or expand the whole frame by around 30% until any vignetting at the sides is cut off. The exact amount needed will depend on the particular lenses that you shoot with, but typically expanding the image by 1.275 times will result in the correct aspect ratio with no vignette. The end result will be 2.39:1 aspect ratio images with resolution to rival that of any other 4K open-gate 35mm camera. This, combined with the FX9's wide dynamic range and advanced colour science, allows you to create very high quality anamorphic content suitable for most types of production.